When you think of landmark games, the ones that shape the industry, what are some of the first things that come to your mind? Doom, for its love of all things heavy metal and for laying the ground rules for all future FPS titles to come? What about something like Call of Duty 4, which helped pioneer the market for the AAA linear shooter? How about Dark Souls for its integration of background storytelling and reaction-based combat? We can all argue which game for which genre, but which game is the granddaddy of psychological horror? You can try your hardest, but it's damn near impossible to find a list that doesn't have this game on the top or close to it. Silent Hill 2. But why is that? What makes this game so compelling even after all these years? Why do people hold this game so high, above not only other horror titles like Dead Space, Resident Evil, and Fear, but over other games in the Silent Hill series itself? Well, I think it's not an easy answer, and much like the nature of Silent Hill 2 itself, the answer lies deep in the bowels of one's own mind, and you have to come to your own conclusions. Sit back, relax, and let's dig deep into this beloved classic in the only way I know how, with the mind and a healthy amount of coffee. Silent Hill 2, despite its name, is a rather unique game, and that I feel pretty much anyone with no prior knowledge of the first game or the future titles can jump straight into it and not feel like they're missing out on something crucial. The closest sequel to Silent Hill 1 was actually 3, and pretty much every game outside of those two has a self-contained story, which makes looking at Silent Hill 2 in a vacuum both a blessing and a curse. Like I said earlier, this game is the game in the series that fans generally suggest to people, and talk about the most, but the drawback of that logic is the other titles receive less attention and deeper analysis. Yet, as someone who studied this game like a religion for over a decade, well, I can see why. What makes Silent Hill 2, to me, so much of a standout is its incredibly dense atmosphere, well-constructed environments, and the fact it's a game that's not afraid to dip its toes into subject matter that's generally considered heavy. Sexual repression, losing a spouse, suicide, and the sheer horror of our own minds. Shit, it's hard to find any media now that can have the stones to even mention these topics or handle them gracefully. Maybe it's because the average person just can't stomach the reality of the world we live in. I don't know. I've mentioned numerous times in my LPs and various conversations in real life, I find it funny that at least in America we're more comfortable with someone saying they're gay or trans, but lack the social ability to handle the idea that someone might be a Luciferian Satanist or a deep-seated nihilist. Everything we see, everything we say, and everything we do generally stems from a place of, well, for lack of a better term, normalcy. People are more inclined to enjoy stories about the hero saving the day, or the cool sports dudes winning the tournament, or the underdog overcoming something. But that's not how the real world works, and that's something Silent Hill 2 does exceptionally well, even after all these years. I admit SH2 is the only game in the series I've completed as a player and not observer, but I have at least a foot in the door from various friends, YouTube channels, and word of mouth. But from what I understand, the general consensus is that the other games in the series don't have the same care put into them that SH2 has, whether it be the environments, the characters, or the overall way the games play. Like I said, I can't comment for games I haven't played in terms of a deeper analysis, but as an observer, sadly, I feel like I could just be content having played Silent Hill 2. I feel any game, film, or piece of music should be able to hold itself up alone, and in a vacuum, because to me that shows there's a level of quality that was put into something. It's why, as a massive fan of the group Korn, I'm okay with having a discussion with people and they say, I only really like Follow the Leader. I don't just scream, fuck you, Untouchables is their best album, and you only like that album because John makes the funny noises in Freak on a Leash. Because shockingly, we all like different things. I think South of Heaven is a better album than Rain and Blood. Fight me.
This is Woodstock, goddammit.
I don't know. Maybe The Room is the real best game in the Silent Hill series? Who knows? Your opinions and mileage may vary, but for me, I think the experiences of SH2 is so hard to match because it sets so many standards for the series moving forward. An imposing antagonistic boss-like creature, otherworld fog world shifts that break up sections of the game, abstract and unsettling imagery that gets more insane as the game progresses, enemies based on fear and uncertainty. You get the idea. I'm well aware the first Silent Hill game had some of these mechanics, but I've not played it, and as much as it pains me to say this, I feel the PS1, despite being one of my favorite consoles of all time, really couldn't convey the themes that Silent Hill 2 had. I mean, hell, just think of how hard the first Silent Hill pushed the PS1. You couldn't even come close to being able to nail things like the facial animations, lighting, or even the sheer amount of audio this game has. I'm going to try and move forward with the idea of experiencing Silent Hill 2 as it is, with as little acknowledgement of other titles in the series, so let's keep going. I'd also like to point out, if you want to, I don't mind if you lower the video and do something else. I'm going to be trying to be as non-visual as humanly possible, because I really want to flex my writing skills here and not my video editing side. All the music you're hearing is also going to be done by me, because, let's face it, you've heard the SH2 tracks a million times, and I want to make this as original as possible. Not to mention, I'm not the first person to talk about some of the topics here, and other YouTubers and fans have laid out most of the groundwork for me, so I really feel like I'm just a drop in the ocean here. If I do a cool job, great. But realize that the greats like Max Darrett will always be much better than me, much more informed, and will always be the true lore keepers of the Silent Hill 2 mythology and franchise. I'm just me. Also, yeah, I'm going to be talking about some heavy subjects. You clicked on a video about an M-rated franchise, and I don't believe in censorship. If we're so progressive as a culture, we should be able to be mature enough to take the kid gloves off and stop using shame tactics for people like me who've experienced many of the themes in this game. I get everyone has a tolerance level and various triggers, but, you know, part of my want as someone diagnosed with MDD, OCPD, and CPTSD is to live in a world where people realize the genuine dangers of walking on eggshells and treating the mentally ill like they're always on the edge. We're just like you, and you can become just like us. It's better to know the ugly truth than to walk on a clean lie, in my opinion. But this is my one and only discretion warning. If this video series ever gets ads on it, cool, but I'm not editing it for the sake of some out-of-touch corporate boomer who wants to sit there with white knuckles gasping at every time I use the fuck word and counting how many possible instances of trigger words I use, like death, kill, sex, or whatever some basement dweller considers offensive in this day and age. Hell, this may shock someone, but I don't care if this video gets 5 views or 5 million because I just wanted to make something for fun. I'm an ex-drama and art student as well as a writer and a musician, so this is truly a passion project for me, and my goal is to contribute my interpretations on the Silent Hill 2 experience. If this series blows up, cool, but I may make other projects similar to this one in the future, but don't hold your breath. I mean, by all means, look at other creators, explore, and come to your own conclusions and opinions. That's what makes art so engaging, and why this video series exists. So, let's get started. So let's get this all out of our systems before I keep moving forward. Silent Hill 2 is not some sort of crazy transcended media form that you need to use your big brain to understand. It's a video game. You push buttons, things happen, and the game ends with a stat screen. For God's sake, you can run down the street with a chainsaw, pretend this is a homeless simulator, and imagine the whole game is some sort of crazy, really bad acid trip, which I'm not gonna stop you. SH2, despite the fact that it's a game, I personally feel is better suited as a game over a film or a novel, and that's why I love games so much as a medium. The player feels tensions when their health or ammo is low, the player can miss certain things because they didn't poke their head into certain areas, and most importantly to me at least, each player, shockingly, plays games differently than the other. If you watch a movie or a show, you're subjected to the writing team and the director and what they want you to see, and very little of your experience can change. It's mainly interpretive, if that makes any sense. It's not like your second time watching Breaking Bad, you suddenly get a scene where Gus Fring kills a dude with a pencil sharpener, or the final scene song changes to Get Low. No, the whole process is structured in a way to compensate for the time crunch of film and TV, and what the director wants you to see. You can't just sit there reading, I don't know, Harry Potter, and all of a sudden you get to decide whether or not Dumbledore kills Snape or Snape kills Dumbledore. No, Snape kills Dumbledore, I'm sorry to spoil this for you. The most a novel can do, and this is also coming from a writer's perspective myself, is to let the reader come to their own conclusions, based on what the writer put on the paper. Maybe you picture Billy Willie the shoe clerk at a bowling alley to look like James Sunderland from Silent Hill 2, but until the writer says explicitly he looked like James Sunderland from Silent Hill 2, you really are subjected to what the writer is capable of presenting based on their own skills and experience. It's also why you can tell the difference between a writer like Dan Brown, who's more of a quick and expedient writer, versus someone like Tolkien, who's more of a set dresser who wants to immerse the reader in the world they're glimpsing. A good writer is only as good as what they know, is what I'm trying to say here. For a video game, however, a player can spend as much or as little time as they want, focusing on the minute details if they want to. Like how there's a vacuum sealed bag of pretzels on a table in Resident Evil 4, or how in Shadow of the Colossus your arrows can get shaken off a Colossus when they shake their body. It's also why I think Silent Hill 2 excels as far as analysis goes, because of the fact the player can choose to engage in what they want, when they want, and how they want. You want to go into every room with a gun in your hand, radio operate a throwdown? Sure, Chief, go right ahead and have at it. You want to turn your flashlight off around enemies because you're not comfortable dodging? Go ahead. This is something games let you do, unlike other media forms, and it's why I personally feel games don't translate to film, because there's so many small things that make up each individual player's experience with the game that no single playthrough is really alike. Each time I've played SH2, I noticed something different. Like how my first time I played it, I actually missed out on knowing about the awesome bathroom jump scare. Yet, let's not beat around the bush. Silent Hill 2 as a game, it's not graceful. Even for the time this game came out, it still feels kinda stiff and robotic. I get it, it's a staple of survival horror to have kinda weird controls, but sometimes you take dumb damage because the game doesn't have a built-in dodge mechanic, or even the courtesy of a stamina meter. If there's anything to take away from what I'm trying to say, it's that despite Silent Hill 2 being applauded as a genuinely well-written and directed game, it's not something you play because you want to experience one-to-one visceral combat or exploration. It's something you play because you want to experience the atmosphere and story. I think the closest analog I can compare this game to is something akin to maybe a walking simulator like the Stanley Parable, or a cinematic game like the Metal Gear series, because despite all the actual gaminess of Silent Hill 2, the vast majority of it is still cinematic or meant to be engaged with like a cinematic title. The core loop of SH2 is also not very complex because really it boils down to a few things. Enter location, get some story movement, explore said location to find key items and consumables, solve basic puzzles, move story along, repeat. I don't feel it's very different to the direct competitor series Resident Evil, but the emphasis is more on making the player immersed in the world of Silent Hill to get under the player's skin in a slow, methodical way through audio cues, camera movements, and ambiguity. A game like Resident Evil 4 is more focused on the combat rather than the world or character building, and it provides the player with goodies that are designed around the combat loop in mind. You can look at any room in Silent Hill 2 in any section and just about everything is constructed with some sort of message in mind, and that's honestly not to say RE4 doesn't do that as well, but in RE4 you're mainly looking through the environments for treasure items, herbs, or ammo. In SH2, the only pickups are health and ammo, and the camera is framed in rooms to make you, the player, push forward either out of necessity or curiosity. I know, like I said earlier, I'm trying to go into this analysis in a vacuum, but it's inevitable that someone will make the comparisons of Silent Hill and Resident Evil. But while they're fundamentally the same kind of game, they pace and play themselves very differently. It's like saying that Shadow of the Colossus and Dark Souls are the same game just because they have boss fights that are against large creatures. Nah, their mechanics are vastly different and their gameplay loops and philosophies are almost polar opposites. Tangents aside, I think that Silent Hill 2 objectively could only work as a game. I can't see it as a film. Even the soundtrack alone without the context of the game is just a piece of what makes this whole thing click. It's not that if SH2 was a film it would be bad, no, I feel it'd be fine, but the level of engagement that allows for immersion that games are known for, that's what makes Silent Hill 2 work. It's not exactly a fun or well-designed game if we're going on the basis that video games inherently need to be fun or satisfying. I mean, horror, despite being subjective, isn't very fun when you really think about it. The hell kind of person really wants to engage with something that's disgusting, upsetting, or morbid? Well, that depends on the person, really, I guess. There are a lot of theories on why we as a species engage in things like horrific or violent media, but there's no real honest-to-God answer. I've watched pretty much all the mainstream older slasher films because my dad wanted to, and it was a fun thing to do, you know, laugh at how stupid some of it is, but it's hard for me to find deeper meaning in things that are fantastical, because at the end of the day, these films are very commercialized and fun movies. Something like The Silence of the Lambs or Eraserhead is far more interesting to me because it's cryptic, it's unsettling, it's paced well, and there's a lot of things going on the audience doesn't get to see or hear. Maybe you or someone you know has played Silent Hill 2 before and they said, yeah, it's boring, I don't like it, or I just don't get it, it's too obtuse. Hopefully you're able to hold back the urge to go get good, scrub, because remember, we all like different things.
Bullshit!
I personally think that the Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts games are absolutely overrated and pretentious games, and you can't change my mind. But I like their mechanics in terms of combat and gameplay loops. I don't think the people that like those games are dum-dums, because I don't like their anime spaghetti games. I just don't like the presentation. Same goes for my opinions on Mortal Kombat versus Street Fighter. I just prefer certain aesthetics, and as petty as it can sound, I'm very picky when it comes to the properties or things I like. The magic of art and media is our ability to choose and engage with what we find enjoyable or worth our time. And you know, maybe you're one of those people that will watch this whole series front to back 100 times but never touch Silent Hill 2. It's possible. I didn't play the game until 2023, and I'd known about it since the game came out. Yet, all the Let's Plays I've watched, all the wiki articles I read, and all the thought I put into the game and series as a whole over all those years, playing the game was a wholly different experience. I admit it freely, I had just about everything spoiled in this game for me before I played it, and yet playing it, I was still engrossed and enthralled by the experience. There were a lot of moments I didn't know about, like where some of the enemies were, or how to solve the puzzles, and lots of little things you can't see from your computer or phone screen. For example, I didn't know just how much of Silent Hill 2's map was open from the start, honestly, and despite the very handy map and all the knowledge of the story, I was shocked by just how disorienting and sprawling the game was even after my first playthrough. Many areas are locked, yeah, it's a staple of these kind of games, but one of the things I think that Silent Hill as a franchise does very well is conveying to the player what doors are useless and what doors are actually something you'll open up later with a key. Useless fluff doors are marked off on your map with a scribble, and their examine text reads, "It's jammed," or "The lock is broken," where key-triggered doors are marked on your map with flat lines and examine text like, "It's locked," or "I can't open it from this side." It sounds so small, but honestly it's a very handy and useful feature that not only helps the players sort what rooms and areas are useful, but it helps make the player engage with the world by paying attention to their surroundings, which not only makes the game last longer, but it also helps show appreciation to the designers who actually made the game. I mean shit, how many times in a game do you honestly stop and look around at things just for the sake of doing it? If the player is able to mark off and explore areas using some sort of mapping feature, it's likely a player will take the time to engage in side content. It's why games like modern Elder Scrolls, Fallout, and Far Cry titles use map markers and sporadic dungeon design. It helps to keep the player constantly in the loop, exploring for things like crafting materials and combat XP for more casual players who enjoy things quick and simple, and usually adding fluff text and environmental storytelling for the more slower players who like to analyze and break down the world they're in. This design isn't new, and Silent Hill 2 does something similar, with each room in the game almost always containing an enemy, a key item, some environmental detail, a goodie, or some combination of these things. It's not necessary to actually go into every room in the game unless you're going for something like the 10-star rank stats, but the game does accommodate each type of player I can really think of. It must also be said that Silent Hill 2 isn't a particularly hard game. I'd honestly say that SH2 strikes a fine line of being both extremely accessible to pretty much someone like your dad, but also with just enough of a satisfying game feel for someone like your mom. Nothing in the game is ever outright unfair, and exploration is actually pretty straightforward. I don't think I could ever trust my dad with a game like Code Veronica X due to the nature of the crushing combat or the game-breaking puzzle items. SH2's combat is so rudimentary and it gets the job done, you know? You just point your gun or stick and you shoot or beat the ever-loving fuck out of whatever gets in your way until it doesn't decide to get up anymore. Just like in real life. Aside from hard mode, enemies don't take all that much of a beating, and none of them are outright that complicated to fight, but we'll talk about that enemy roster later. Barring a few exceptions, enemies in this game don't really have more than just a simple melee attack based on player proximity. Combat, like I said, is rudimentary, and I mean that in an endearing way. It was never the focus of Silent Hill 2, and it really shows. You'll always have more than enough health and ammo, even if you don't go out of your way to explore all that much. Melee weapons don't break, no matter how many skulls you smack, unlike in a game like Condemn, where the focus of the game is more about the combat and environment constantly changing to suit the player's needs in the situation. There's never any urgency for the player to try and mix up their game all that much. You either shoot or stick enemies, but because of the wonky controls, I'd say that it's better to stick to a firearm, mainly just to expedite the combat and move on. The main focus of SH2 from a gameplay perspective is to solve puzzles to move from one area of the game to the next. Despite the rather open-seeming game world, you really are generally following a linear path, and the design of the areas you explored tends to have some sort of shortcut or natural landmark to indicate where you should be and where you've already been. Like I said, the map is a super handy feature, and it feels natural that James marks where things are at, like locked doors and puzzle areas. Speaking of puzzles, the puzzles of SH2 are adequate. On the normal puzzle difficulty, they're fairly straightforward, with things like place the doodads to make the man scream, or find the toilet wallet to get a locker combo. None of the key items are fairly cryptic or that hard to find, thankfully, and James does have a nice feature where he moves his gaze to look at things you can pick up, so you're fairly safe from accidentally missing something you actually need to progress the game, and quite a few things are actually pointed out in cutscenes at various points. Of course, there are some pretty obtuse solutions to things, one of the most egregious examples being the fact you need to grab a case of juice you find in one half of the apartment complex section, use it to push a trash bag down a garbage chute at the other complex section to get a coin that spills out of the trash on the ground level outside the area where you just started. Fuck me, there's more steps to this puzzle than there is for me to get the mail every day, but it's not the worst thing ever. It's honestly better than classic Resident Evil, where you had to balance both your combat and puzzle items at all times. The game never actually makes you interact or combine too many items at once, and all your consumables actually stack infinitely, so there's never a worry about having too much or too little when it comes to preparation for certain places. Like I said earlier, the core mechanics of this game are actually very accessible. I think that this sort of laid-back approach to things is also what makes SH2 so easy to recommend to people who don't even like video games. Like your dad, who you should call right now and have him play the game. The only time SH2 really does get kinda gross and yucky is mainly if you put the game on the highest difficulty, and yeah, I mean shit, it's as hard as it gets, what do you expect, right? But at the same time, you really start to feel why the game doesn't excel at satisfying or engaging combat. It takes ages to kill enemies, and their increased speed and aggression just makes it so that you're almost always forced into fighting them, and it gets really fucking messy, especially on what are otherwise normally interesting moments. I mean, Christ, the hallway chase scene is the definition of trial and error on hard, and the awkwardness of fighting the enemies like the nurses is just fucking awful. You can say, well, don't put the game on hard, dum-dum, and you know what? Fuck you, you're right. But you have to remember, some people like me enjoy a challenge in a game, and I have a design philosophy that a good game can flex all of its mechanics on the highest or lowest difficulty if it's designed properly. This game, well, not so much. To me, it's baffling why things like the boat section have unique controls based on the difficulty, or the fact you can run into walls if you're not careful in hard mode. I'm not saying it's bad either, it's actually kind of interesting to me, but I feel like if these options were there from the get-go, it would have made playing the game in hard mode a little bit more tolerable. After all, how many people even know these differences are there, aside from the obvious things of a hard mode, like more enemy health and damage output? Also, speaking of difficulty and differences, I love how as you play SH2 into a New Game Plus cycle, new endings and items open up. I think this is a wonderful way of adding replay value and increasing the player's interest to keep looking for new things. I mean, yeah, you can say it's padding, but remember the time that this game came out. The internet wasn't as widely usable as it is now, so imagine if you're playing this game without prior knowledge and on a repeat playthrough, you notice something like the Rebirth ending items. Naturally, this is a great way for players to look more into the game and see just how much blood they can squeeze from the stone. I mean, yeah, now people have data mined this game and scrutinized every texture, audio file, and possible lore detail, but there are still little things people notice about SH2 to this day, and they probably will forever because it's just an interesting game. I mean, shit, it blew my mind to even know there was the See My Dead Wife audio trigger that can happen in room 209. Like, your game seed can just not have that. I didn't hear it until I think my third playthrough, and yeah, it does turn out that the sound was actually just a stock whisper sound effect, But imagine this was 2001. It just feels so modern, if that makes any sense. You know, if your friend said, "Hey man, what do you think about the whispering in room 209?" and you said, "Huh? The fuck you talking about, dude? You been up watching the MTVs too late again?" It would naturally pique your curiosity and you might actually check it out to see if they were just pulling your leg. I mean, hell, as a kid, before the internet, games were pretty damn mystical to not just me, but many others. Things like rumors would spread a lot, like Bigfoot in San Andreas, the Mew under the truck rumor in Pokemon, or inflating the tits on the hoverboard alien in Ratchet and... Oh. Well, you get my point. I guess what I'm trying to say is Silent Hill 2 on a purely game level may not be remarkable, but because of the fact it's a game, it gives players so much more than any other media can. I'm not interested in the design process and history of SH2, like, yeah, it's cool, but you know, development and final product are two different things. We don't actually play as Akira Yamaoka grinding pipes together or Masahiro Ito drawing vagina monsters, okay? We play the game we got as a collaborative effort of those wonderful designers at Team Silent, and it is what it is. A product of passion, and it clearly shows. This is something that actually bothers me, and maybe it's because I have OCPD, but go nowhere statements like, "Oh, this movie had a budget of $10,000 and earned $200,000, or, "Oh, we were gonna originally cast Sam Jackson to voice James Sunderland."
What? You must be joking.
Say what again? I dare you. I double dare you, motherfucker. Say what one more goddamn time.
Like, from a realistic standpoint, it honestly doesn't matter. Maybe I'm too much of an in-the-now kind of guy and too cynical, but if someone told me, you know, Silent Hill 2 didn't launch to great critical acclaim at first, my first response is, cool, I don't care, form your own opinion. I don't believe in that ass-backwards archaic, "you're entitled to your opinion" statement because it's pointless what other people actually think of what you like, personally. If your opinion is changed by others, that's not bad too. It's pretty normal for people to change their taste over time. I used to just like SH2 because it was creepy looking and had the guy with the big knife who wore geometry homework on his head. I actually used to think that the people who liked this game were pretentious and the fans looked way too deep into it. Bit of a coincidence now, I guess. However, my opinions of this game obviously grew and adapted as I matured. And as I looked deeper and deeper and deeper, I realized something. It wasn't the game aspect of Silent Hill 2 that people adored, it was the story, and how much of that I personally resonated with. And that was what made me realize there's a reason this game is a landmark, and nothing else can topple it. Thanks for watching so far, and I'll see you in the next one.